Hello all and welcome to another episode of Moon Views. Today we're here with PHS graduate, actor, and published playwright Jan Probst. We're very excited to be with her. Her work spans from anything from roles to in what is known as a improv film to the kitchen sink drama Bird on a Tree Branch that has recently been produced. We're so lucky to be in conversation with her. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you. I just kind of want to jump right in, and I want to talk to you about the very beginning of this journey. So let's step back for a moment and imagine you are yourself graduating from PHS. Where are you? What are you thinking? What do you think your next step for your life is at that point?
Well, on graduating from high school, my next step was college. And I did go to college. And at that time, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to study. I didn't know where I wanted to go with things. So eventually I majored in psychology. Which I think has actually been very useful in my playwriting. But I wasn't a theater or drama major. Many playwrights are not, although some are. I mean, sometimes you know right away and you head toward that direction and off you go. My path was much more of a wandering one. So I did that. And once I moved to Chicago briefly, and then eventually landed in California. And once I got out here, I got hooked in with the theater scene out here. And at the time, there were a lot of small theater groups, a lot of black box type theater thing going. And I was a member of one of those groups. And we did a lot of kind of political theater, what used to be called street theater, and, just dealing with the topics of the day, the cultural and political scene of the day. So that was kind of my entry in. I will say, I not too long ago, I was at a high school reunion in Plymouth, and I ran into an old classmate, Richard Bergman, who had a career in television for quite some time as an actor. And he and I were in the senior play together at PHS. And we talked to one another and we said, oh, that's when we got the bug. We actually got bit by the bug when we did the senior play. Oh. Yeah, which is kind of sweet.
Yeah. Well, it's actually really interesting because I recently took a theater history class for my minor. And the 60s and 70s are such a rich time in theater history. It's so experimental, and so many smaller companies are, forming and building. And it's just like, it was such a time where theater seemed a lot more accessible than maybe it does now. What was it like being in theater in California, of all places, during that time?
Well, it was very fun. And, there were just a lot of little theater groups around. And at that point, mostly, you'd form a group and then you would write a show and then you would produce your own show. And look for a venue where you could put it up and have, sometimes with a short run. If you were lucky, you could put together a longer run, but no one had any money to do anything. So these were not big, lavish productions. These were small productions, in small theaters, and the run was whatever the run was. It was something, mostly people had day jobs. And then would do theater around that. At that point in my life, I knew people who were pursuing a career as an actor. I was not pursuing a career as an actor. I had a day job like a lot of people, and then I would do this at night. I took acting classes and went that route. It was very interesting. There was a lot going on culturally and politically, as you can imagine, at that time. I mean, I was out here mid 70s, late 70s. The the country had gotten out of the Vietnam War not too long before that. So that was still a lot on people's minds. There were a lot of different political issues happening, and and that's what everybody was talking about. So I don't know, it was a fun time to do it.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting how it can be this side thing that you love, but it's ultimately not what you're all about, and then it can just overtake you and become this huge passion. When was that? When did you have that moment when you were like, this is not something little, this is something more serious?
I don't know if there was one specific moment for me. I honestly think there were a series of moments, and I did really want to pursue acting in a more serious manner, and was trying to do that through training. I hadn't been through a college drama program, which kind of was too bad. I hadn't done that, but you find other ways. So I did pursue a lot of training and was constantly looking for opportunities to get my foot in the door better. That was very challenging. So what happened for me over time is that I kind of went in and out of theater during the late 70s and into the 80s. I studied martial arts. And it's kind of a funny story that actually relates to drama, because I watched the original The Avengers. It's the one that had Mrs. Emma Peel and John Steed. And Emma Peel did martial arts. She did judo on the show on TV. And I was watching that in high school, and like, women didn't do martial arts at all at that time, let alone on TV. And I thought, oh, I want to do that. So in the 70s, late 70s, I found there were martial arts schools that I could study at. So I started doing that. And I kind of went off on that journey away from theater and away from acting. Got my black belt, trained for a long time, taught classes in martial arts. And then we had the school I spent the most time at, which is a place called Hand to Hand. It's still here in Oakland, California. We formed a performance troupe called Streetwise Women's Martial Arts Theater. And again, we went out, it was like street theater, and we'd perform at the flea market and places like that. So there it was again. It just was never far from my consciousness. So I was doing that again. And then I went off on a different path and studied hypnotherapy for a while. I mean, my path it's not a straight trajectory. Did some other things, and eventually I was always a writer. I was always writing something. And sometime in the early 90s, I was in a writing group, and I was writing vignettes, and I wrote a monologue that ended up becoming the central piece of a solo play that I ended up writing and performing. I didn't quite know that's what it was when I wrote it, but it became that. And that really led me back in the door finally pretty permanently. I performed that solo show, had a lot of fun doing it, and in doing it realized, okay, I need more training, both in acting and particularly in writing. I really need to hone these crafts and figure out what I'm doing. So I did both of those things. I went through a 3-year private conservatory acting program that was here locally at the Bennett Theater Lab, which has since moved to, I think his lab is in Tucson now. It's run by Phil Bennett. I did that and immediately segued into a graduate level playwriting program at San Francisco State, which I absolutely loved. I would say of all the schooling I've had, I loved that the most. And that's where I really finally got my hands into playwriting and understood it better than I ever had. And it just continued to build off of that. So it really is the last, I don't know, 25 years here that I've been pretty solidly in this. It's still hard to do as a profession. I mean, I still was working other jobs and doing other things. I don't think anyone goes into playwriting to get rich. Even Tony Kushner teaches classes. So it's, you know, you do it because you love it. But that, I don't know, does that answer your question? It's kind of a long winding answer.
No, I'm glad it's a little bit of a winding answer, because I feel like, at least when I've talked to like my theater professors or other playwrights, especially young playwrights like me who are still in our undergrad and still trying to figure out, like, is this something I want to do professionally, or is this just something I enjoy or whatnot? What you always hear is there is no linear path for a playwright. You will figure it out. You just don't know how. That's what you always hear. So, I mean, with martial arts and, you know, everything all over, it's almost comforting to hear, you know?
Well, good. Yeah.
I wonder, let's dig in a little bit to the process of playwriting, since we kind of ended talking about your time in San Francisco. First of all, from a student that has worked with the American Theater College Festival before and submitted things and done acting there, like, that's a difficult program to get your foot into. Congratulations on having a play be a finalist. That's a big deal.
Thank you.
Of course.
I think it may have been a little easier back when I did it than it is now. I mean, things tend to get more competitive and more popular. So, yeah.
I want to talk about, on a basic level, how do you reap inspiration for a play? Is it like a nugget that you hear? Is it a storyline that you start crafting? Like, where do you start when you start?
I kind of come at it from a few angles, but my favorite is just to keep writing and work from prompts. I love writing prompts, and a prompt can be anything. I mean, it can be I often will work from an image, because an image you can go anywhere with. You know, 4 birds sitting on a wire, and then you decide they're a team of Italian gangsters talking to one another, or they don't have to be Italian. Gangsters talking to one another, and and off you go, and pretty soon you have a 10-minute play written. But I work best, I think, from prompts. Often I do have a little folder called my idea bank, and I'll put ideas in there for plays that I get. But I have to somehow get more oomph behind it than just an idea. Something has to really spark my interest. I'm going to talk a little bit about writing during the pandemic, because
Please do.
That's been rough. I struggled with my playwriting during the pandemic. It was there was a lot going on, and we weren't just having the pandemic. We went through the whole what happened with George Floyd and the aftermath, Black Lives Matter. We went through the worst wildfire season on record in California, which was very scary out here. And, I could list all the things, the election and the aftermath and all of that. So what I decided to do very early on, when the Bay Area shut down because of the virus, which was March 17th of 2020, I thought, okay, I don't know how my writing's going to go in this time, and I don't know how long this time is going to be. I thought it was going to be 3 weeks at first. I decided to write a journal, to keep a journal about what was happening with the virus, because it was so wildly unusual. The fact that that we were shutting down was completely bizarre. So I did that, and I wrote every day. I finally closed that journal on June 15th, which was the day that the Bay Area, quote unquote, reopened after being closed all those many months. And there's a wealth of material in there because of everything that happened. So I think that sometimes, I mean, if you have a direct entry into an idea you have, whether you're writing from a prompt or you've heard something on a podcast that sparks your interest or wherever it comes from, that's great. Sometimes you're going to discover it from other writing that you're doing that you think doesn't have anything to do with a play. I mean, this was a journal I kept. I wasn't writing a play, but there is so much material in there that I do find intriguing and interesting. And I think as we get more distance from this, whatever, I don't know, this year plus that we spent being masked up and away from everything we love, I think that will be very fruitful. I remember having a conversation with Gary Garrison during that time, and I don't know if you know who he is. He works with the Dramatists Guild. He's worked with the Kennedy Center. He's known as being Mr. 10-minute play. He's just writing the 10-minute play and does it very well. And I was talking to him about, well, here we are. You know, I write plays and all the theaters are closed. I mean, even Broadway is closed. I mean, what does a playwright do when everything is closed? Well, you go on writing anyway. And he reminded me very wisely that at heart, we're all storytellers. So, you know, you look for the story that wants to be told and don't worry about whether or not it's getting on stage or looking for a theater. Just write your story in whatever way you want to do that. Again, a long and winding answer to a very simple question.
Hey, we're writers. That's what we do. We take the prompt and run.
Yes.
I think being a theater student during this pandemic has been wild. I mean, I was part of a play that was on stage, minimal set, masks on, all of our blocking were 6 feet apart, and then it was recorded and there was no audience. And it was a satire. So you're getting ready for laughs and you don't get any, you know, and it's been very weird. And in all of our classes, we keep talking about, you know, the popularization of like the Zoom production or the video production or, you know, whatever it may be. We talked a lot about, had a lot of discussion about the definition of theater. And if the pandemic and, you know, a pro shot versus a Zoom production versus a live production, if that changes your definition of theater and if that changes what it means. And it was a lot of back and forth. It was really hard for us to come to a conclusion because a lot of us said, you know, well, theater needs the audience. You need the feedback, the live, you know, chemistry. You need the people in the workshop table reading. You need togetherness, right? But then, you know, I was part of a one-woman show that ended up being, you know, fully recorded and made kind of a film, kind of a theater project composite. And through that, it was kind of like, well, this is still theater. We're not going to see who sees it, but people are going to see it and people are going to connect to it, even if we don't get to, you know, feel that connection. And you had Bird on a Tree Branch, which was produced by Phoenix Art Association and on Zoom. What was that like as a playwright who has, you know, been part of the production before and now it's a completely different landscape?
I will say that I was very resistant to it at first. We were actually, we were just heading into Tech Week on stage when the pandemic hit and everything shut down. So for a while we thought, oh, well, let's do it in the summer or we'll just postpone it. Well, you know, we all know nothing happened in the summer.
Right.
So the producer really wanted to explore doing it on Zoom as more of these Zoom productions were coming out, and I was so resistant to it. I really wanted to see that play on stage, but I trusted her. She's Linda Ayers Frederick from Phoenix Arts Association and Phoenix Theater. We had a good director in Julie Lockfeld, and we had a good cast. One cast member dropped off, then we had to recast it, but that went well. it was the lead we were recasting, and that went well. The rehearsals at first, seemed very bizarre. I mean, no one was in the same place. And so we'd be on screen just like you and I are, and we'd have, 3 actors, the director, maybe the producer would pop in and out. I might be there or I might not. And that's how it was rehearsed. And the play the play takes place in a basement, and everybody's in one place, which in some sense lends itself to Zoom a little easier than another play might. Mm-hmm. It did become a bit of a talking head production, whereas on stage there are more opportunities, for movement and just for creating a different feeling with it. But the play is very dialogue driven, so that also worked well on Zoom. And I honestly, when they showed me the first a rough cut of what they had. I attended several rehearsals, but I tried to kind of stay out of their way because it can make the actors feel very nervous if the playwright's in the room. So I basically interacted with the director and answered any questions she had, and I'd show up when she needed me and things like that. But they showed me the first rough cut, and I was amazed. I thought, wow, these guys really worked this material. I mean, they just went for it, and under very good direction, those actors did a really nice job with the script. So in the end, I ended up being very pleased with it, and there was a technical director who did a very good job with just music and providing backgrounds. They worked with green screens so that they could drop in the same background so they could make them look like they were in the same place, even though they were many miles apart. And it went very well, but I honestly, I was resistant. And then in the end, I was pleased with the end product, but it's sure different. I mean, that was a completely different animal than being in the theater and watching something develop on the stage. So I think what I had to do was get over my initial disappointment that our world premiere on the stage got canceled, and get over that so that I could realize, okay, here's another opportunity. Just go through that door.
Yeah. Well, for those that don't know, I'll put people in the know. Bird on a Tree Branch is about, I described it as a kitchen sink drama. I think that's probably apt, do you think?
Yeah, I think you can say that about it.
Okay.
It's a spring day in April 1965. Vivian and Doug are a white middle-class couple taking refuge in their basement as they find themselves in the path of the worst tornado on record in the Midwest. They share their shelter with Hannah, a black woman they picked up at the bus stop on their way home from church. Racial tension, misunderstanding, family secrets, and regret underpin the story of this play. Civil rights meets civil war as the trio struggle to survive this shelter from the storm.
This was a really long process for you. This play, right? You shelved it for a while and then came back to it. So what we think, hopefully coming out of the pandemic, who knows with the variant, right? But hopefully coming out, what do you see for the future of this play? Do you think it's in other people's hands now, or do you think you can still get your hands on it in a more in-person manner?
Well, since it got published, I currently don't hold the licensing rights. Those rights are held by the publisher, Next Stage Press, and they will, they are promoting the play. I can also do the same, continue to promote the play. It's just that whoever chooses to produce it needs to deal with getting the rights through Next Stage Press, which is just common in theater once you're published. So, and I am continuing to promote the play, and we'll see what happens next with it. I'm sure it will have a stage life ultimately. I don't quite know what that will be. Looking at it, I think it's a good play for a good college drama to put on in a black box theater there. It's a small cast, and and there aren't a lot of set requirements. I think this play can be pulled off in small venues very easily. So I hope it will have that stage life that I've always dreamed of for it.
Mm-hmm. What was it like returning to the project? Like how was it like finally blowing the dust off of it and saying, okay, let's try again? Did you rewrite the whole thing? Did you take scraps of what you already had? What was it like?
Oh, good questions. Let me just fill the audience in a little bit. I actually started writing this play when I was in grad school and had a couple of, I think 3 staged readings of it, continued to work on it post grad school. I did more research on this play than any play I've ever written. And after numerous drafts, I just couldn't finish the play. I couldn't find the right ending. I just couldn't get it done. And at some point decided to just shelve it. And it sat there for years and years, literally, until, until some advice from a writer friend of, hey, why don't you look at that play again? So what it was like returning to it, I mean, I pulled out what I thought was my last draft that I had written of it. And I thought, okay, there's a play here. There's definitely a play here. I was very pleased with some parts of it. I could see the weakness in other parts, but I was immediately drawn back in. I thought, oh, I can't leave this sitting in the drawer. I need to figure this play out. I did not rewrite the whole thing. I rewrote parts of every scene for sure. Mm-hmm. One character I almost completely rewrote. I reinvented her in a different way, which I think really helped me tell the story I was trying to tell. And the other 2 characters, they stayed true to who they were in the original drafts. I won't say I kept all their dialogue because I certainly didn't. I changed each scene. But I had really strong, more than just the bones of a play, I had a really strong draft to work from. So it didn't take that much. I mean, maybe it took all those years of sitting in the drawer and being away from it for me to have some different experiences and view it from a different viewpoint and see what was working and what wasn't.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm very glad I got it out of the drawer again.
Yeah, right. Paid off. Yeah, I wonder, we're talking a little bit about, this is something I think about in school. I thought about it a lot, and now I'm so excited to get to ask somebody the question. In playwriting, this is a very general question. When you look at a playwright and their body of work, like let's say, for example, we're looking at Tennessee Williams. Oftentimes you find themes of the outcast through a lot of his work. Or Arthur Miller, you find themes of failure through a lot of his work. Mm-hmm. What do you think is your playwright theme, if you have one?
Boy, what a good question.
Thank you.
I have been drawn to writing about families a lot. I've lived in California many years now, more than 40 years, and I'm still writing what I would call MidWestern plays. It's just, I think my heart's still there, and I love exploring that material, particularly, there were my years growing up there, and then there's the Midwest of today. So I like exploring that material, but I would say, I think you could certainly find plays that I've written that don't have anything to do with families, but I'd say I am very drawn to the family scene. I'm drawn to secrets and how they affect relationships and the choices people make. And yeah, I guess that's off the top of my head. That's what I would say.
Oh, great answer. I just love that question. I had to ask. Earlier, you mentioned how the reason Bird on a Tree Branch kind of got shelved was because you weren't sure how to finish it. Mm-hmm. And I find me and my colleagues and friends, we find that beginning the play, you're excited, you've got an idea, you're like, here we go. but ending it is so difficult. It's so hard to wrap it in a bow. And through your, 25 years of playwriting experience or more, how have you overcome that hump?
Oh, you're assuming I've overcome it.
Learn to deal with it a little bit better, maybe.
Well, first of all, endings are hard. That's not an easy thing. And one trick that I use is I look at each character, particularly the lead characters. Now with Bird on a Tree Branch, there were just 3 characters. So I can look at each of them and think to myself, where do I want that character to be at the end of the play? Where do I want their journey to take them? And take note of that. And I have at times written a final scene long before I've written all the scenes that lead up to it. So that I can then know, okay, that's where I want them to be. Now I have to figure out how to get them from over here to over there. So that's one way to go. And by the time I get to the end, it may have changed. I don't have to keep that ending that I came up with. I may decide, actually Doug's journey went over this way and I'm okay with that. So I would say that's my favorite trick to do. I know that several playwrights that I've been in various playwriting groups with work from outlines and know from the beginning. I don't know if you do, if you work from an outline. I think it's a great thing to do. I happen to be someone who's very resistant to it, which is just silly. I think outlines work very well, and it does a bit of the same thing. I would just go ahead and jump all the way to the end and write that final scene. You may end up not using it at all. You may end up somewhere else, but it informs that earlier writing and gives you a direction to head in to get to that ending. So I don't know, that's a trick that I use.
Yeah, I wrote it down, probably gonna try it out. Yeah, I also find that I'm resistant to outlines. It's what people say, just do it and then you'll have it. And if it changes, it's fine. But then I always feel like it's so permanent. I'm like, then I can't freeform, then I can't, go with the flow. I feel you.
I feel that I have those exact same thoughts. And it's also, I agree with whoever's telling you, well, you can change it. It does. I mean, it's just an outline.
Right. It's just on a piece of paper. You can rip it up if you want. Yeah. So recently you worked on a developmental reading of a play with Valdez Theater Conference in Alaska, of all places.
Yeah.
What is that process like? What was, just tell me a little bit about the experience.
Sure. Well, Valdez Theater Conference is a fabulous place to go as a playwright. It's really, it really is a playwrights conference. I mean, they put the focus on the playwright. The playwright is in the center. They have a lot of actors who come and love coming and being readers there, but the focus is not on them. It's on the playwright and the plays. So what they do with plays up there is called a developmental reading. And before you get to a developmental reading, I mean, there are stages. You write a play, you come up with a very rough draft of it, and you have a table read first, and you invite your actor friends over, feed them dinner, and have them read the play out loud so you can hear it. That's the first thing. And then there may be a staged reading or two, which may be not very staged. Again, just actors holding script and reading it just so you can hear it. Because no matter how much you hear it in your head and you're reading it off your script, you really need to put it into the hands of actors and see how they interpret that character and is your storyline working, etc. So that's very much what happens in Alaska at these developmental readings. This year, I've been to this conference. This would be my 3rd time going. It was canceled the year before. And this time they had 75 different playwrights with their plays in the conference. They created a hybrid model because at the time that they had to say yes or no, we're having a conference or we aren't, we still didn't quite know where we were with COVID, and there were vaccinations just starting to happen. So they created a hybrid model where I think there were 50 of us that went to Alaska and were on site. There were another 25 that Zoomed in from home. And they, they put cameras on all the readings and they live streamed them, which was a great idea. They live streamed on YouTube, so we got a bigger audience. Your family and friends could watch. They didn't have to fly all the way to Alaska. So they did that. And what happened there, I had communicated via email with my director, the director of the reading, a few times ahead of time. So we were kind of on the same page. We had one rehearsal in which you really only have enough time to go through the play once. So we have one rehearsal, and then the staged reading is put up. And it really was just music stands and actors either seated or standing, reading from the script. But in the rehearsal, the director draws out, more information about the character and kind of helps the actor get to the character that they'll be reading. Then there's a panel of experts, 3 people basically, usually directors, dramaturgs, other playwrights, who then give feedback afterwards. And they can give really any feedback they want. As a playwright, I submitted some questions. I wanted to know, did the structure of the play work? Because I worked with a different structure than I had in the past. So I wanted to know responses to that structure. And we also put the same question to the audience and got responses. What did they think of the title of the play? It was a working title. I wanted to know if I was getting close or if I should ditch that title and look for something else. And just the standard questions of where were you confused as an audience member? Where did you feel that you needed more information? Where did you find that I was giving you too much information? So, if you think of those questions ahead of time, it can really help the information that comes in. And then the panelists had very interesting comments, things that I hadn't thought about on the play. So after that reading, which is, just takes place in a conference room with some cameras streaming on YouTube, I come home with a fair amount of information, and I can choose to go with that feedback or not. I mean, it's my play. I'm the one writing it. I can decide, yeah, that's a nice comment, but I don't think so. Or I can go with the advice. And then afterwards, I also, because I was part of the conference, got a half an hour, it's actually more like 45 minutes, interaction with the lead panelists where we dove even deeper into the play. So it's just so useful to the process. I mean, I'm now, doing another rewrite, and I do want to have another reading, and then I think this play will be ready to be produced, and I'll start looking in that direction. But it's so useful. I mean, it's such a collective process, theater. You can't get there without the actors and hopefully a director outside of yourself giving you what you can get from a reading, because it really helps the development of the play. It's not a novel. It's not poetry. It's a play.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think too, or at least in my experience, I've got my friends together and been like, can we just have like a table read? Like, I just need to hear this out loud. Like, it would help. But doing a staged reading, which I got to do last semester at my school, which was so fulfilling, is different because you're rehearsing once or twice and then putting it on, or, however many times, and they're making decisions. And when you do a table read, they're just reading it and they're going, oh, that was good. So it's totally different experience to get to like, let actors just go, make your choices. Let me see who you think the character is, not what the words on the page are. And that sounds like such an incredible experience. I mean, coming home with a stack of notes to sit down and go, okay, here we go.
The stack wasn't that big, but yeah. I mean, that's exactly it. That's exactly what happens. Actors, you just, they help. So does a director.
Yeah, very true. Okay, let me really quickly glance over what I've got. Make sure I'm not missing anything I really am dying to ask. I am missing something. Okay. because I am a theater student
Hmm.
and a little bit of a theater nerd,
Yay.
I'm curious what particular, if there is one, play or playwright that inspires you.
Hmm. There are probably several. Locally here in the Bay Area, I'd say Michelle Carter, Lauren Gunderson, who is not so local anymore. She's nationwide. I like her work. I followed the work of Paula Vogel for years, and then her protege, Sarah Ruhl. I like those plays. I have read a lot of the work of Tina Howe. And, you know, then there are the ones, I mean, I would say I certainly have been influenced by the big names in theater, Arthur Miller, Tennessee Williams. I've definitely drawn from what I've gotten from their work, looking at the work of Lanford Wilson. There's just a lot there. I don't know. Is that a good enough list?
It's a great list. So many name drops and a lot for me to look up on. Yeah, I think it's, for me, I'm still, there are millions of plays to read, and you have to be literate to find, oh, there's this kind of structure and this voice is interesting, and, you know, just to like learn and grow as yourself, but also to know the landscape and what it has been, what it could be, what it is now, you know. But I always find myself drawn to classics, because how can you not be drawn? They're classics for a reason, you know. Streetcar Named Desire is I think would be my answer. That play really struck me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I didn't expect to be struck, but it got me.
Yeah, it's interesting when that happens. I think that first those big names are what I was studying, and then I began to study more women playwrights, simply because I am one. And back when I first was involved with theater and started playwriting, there weren't very many, or at least we weren't getting produced. It's better now. Things have definitely changed. They could be better yet. And, you know, the diversity in theater is a question that, I mean, it's an issue that needs to be addressed, not only in terms of women, but in terms of race, gender, just the whole 9 yards of diversity. We have to be better in theater, because it was, it was a white man's game for a really long time. And some of those white guys are really good playwrights, so they'll study them. But yeah.
Right. Yeah, that was something we also talked about, you know, in my theater history class. Most of the curriculum was, okay, we're starting in this, you know, in the 1700s. Here are, you know, 5 or 6 plays to read. And then we're moving on to the 1800s. Here are more, you know. And we didn't read a single female playwright. Well, we read Fashion, which is written in 1700s, I think, by a woman. And then there were no women until we got to like the 80s.
Yeah.
That's how it is. But now there's, you know, a lot more. You just have to find the names, you know. You have to still a little bit of a search. But I think in general, finding the right play or the right playwright or the, you know, your style of contemporary play is kind of a lot of digging.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's reading plays is a great thing to do. I mean, read plays, read more plays, read more plays. I mean, taking a class in dramatic literature, which I did at some point along the line, even before grad school, which got me into the habit of reading plays, which I wasn't so much in the habit of. I was more into going and seeing theater, which is fine. But if you're going to write them, you really got to look at how they're put together, as you said. Yeah.
Yeah. I read the sample of Bird on a Tree Branch from the publisher. And I just adore when you sit down and you've never read a playwright before and you get that opening chunk or sentence of stage direction. I feel like it says so much about the playwright, how they wrote that stage direction. Don't you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting comment. Yeah.
It could be, you know, like some playwrights are so narrative, it reads like a novel that first. It's huge, half the page, you know.
Tennessee Williams, yes.
Yes, very much so.
Infamous.
Eugene O'Neill too.
Yes.
Pages and pages of just, the set looks just like this. And you're like, okay, great. And then some are just like, she sits. And you're like, okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then there's Susan Laurie Parks, who virtually writes no stage direction.
Right. Oh, I love her. Oh, great. Well, it's been wonderful talking to you, and I could just keep talking to you, but I don't want to keep you all day. Before I wrap this up, I ask what I will always ask. Is there anything else you want to talk about or say?
Oh, wow. And I've got this platform with millions of viewers. You know, if you're a playwright or a budding playwright out there, just follow it in whatever the best way is that you can do that. Read plays, go to see plays. Don't worry about your path being a particularly direct path. Just find the one that works for you.
Well, that's beautiful to leave us with. Well, to our viewers, thank you all for watching the next episode of Moon Views. And thank you again to Jan Probst for coming and talking and leaving all these nuggets of wisdom for aspiring playwrights and people who are curious about the theater world. We have a lot of links in the description for you to go peruse if you're more curious about Wild Rose Moon or about Jan or about a combination of the two. So thank you all for watching. Thank you, Jan, for coming.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Katy.